Hello, everyone, and welcome to Schmidtless Live. I am your host, Kurt Schmidt, president and partner at Foundry. This show is meant to inspire and educate leaders all over. So I'm really excited that you're joining me today because I have got a fantastic guest joining us. We're going to learn so much today. It's going to be amazing. Even though right now it looks a bit like Christmas outside, we are getting closer to spring, I think, but we'll see. I don't know. I don't remember what the groundhog did, but I'm sure it wasn't good. Let's jump over and talk to Tru. Tru, how are you today? Thanks for taking the time to join me.
Hi, Kurt. I'm great. Thank you for asking. And it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you're at the Timberwolves and the Lynx. What's your role there? What's your job?
I am the diversity and inclusion officer for the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Minnesota Lynx. And so my role is to provide senior level guidance, strategic guidance and direction throughout the organization to help ensure we are being as inclusive and equitable as we can possibly be as an organization, making sure everyone that walks through our doors feels a sense of belonging, like they belong there, they belong here. And so that's kind of the internal focus, kind of big picture. And then externally, making sure we're leveraging our platform as an influential institution in this region to help address any inequities that may exist in the Twin Cities.
That's great. And so tell me a bit about the organization. So a lot of people, obviously, when they think of basketball teams, they think of just the players on the field, but the organization is much bigger and broader than that in total, right?
Oh, absolutely. There is a entire business of basketball, if you will. It much like many other corporations and organizations, we have marketing, we have legal, we have HR, we have IT, we have business analytics and intelligence, we have operations. So all of these roles exist to help make the organization, the franchise operate and run. And most people aren't aware of that. I mean, quite honestly, growing up as a fan of the sport, I wasn't aware that all of these career opportunities existed in the NBA or in sports at all.
Yeah, because it's you think it's a pretty large machine it takes to run a professional sports team. A few years ago, I had on the general manager of the Twins, and we talked a lot about what it was like to build teams, and not teams in terms of baseball, but teams that could support those actual teams, because people don't assume that those are things that are really needed in order to make the big show happen, right?
No, not at all. I mean, you have the game day staff, the ushers, and at the arena, like all of that signage that you see on the big screen, all of the imagery that you see throughout the arena, all of the partners that you see present, whether it's the suites, the corporate suites, or the signs on a lot of the chairs in the arena, like corporate partnerships. Like someone has to make that happen, and someone has to make sure that we are providing the right guidance and direction for the people that are greeting you when you arrive. Someone has to make sure that when you go in that app, you download that Timberwolves app, you download that Lynx app, and you purchase your ticket, you select your seat. Like there are people who have to make sure that is a seamless and turnkey transaction for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so with that, like, moving to kind of our subject today, and your role, years and years ago, diversity, the idea of diversity and things was just kind of, you did a training course, and then you maybe watched a video or some things. But now we have you people in your role that's there. You're dug in. You're part of the day-to-day operation. One of the things that I really liked about the way that your bio kind of reads is about the idea of building bridges, because I feel that people sometimes look at diversity as a destination, not as sort of a new way of being, right? So tell me a little bit about your philosophy and how you approach diversity and inclusion in your role. How do you think about it?
I really think about it along the lines of being a bridge builder, quite honestly, right? And if you really look at the breakdown of the definitions of those words, and equity is an important part of that, right? Diversity, yes. Equity, and inclusion. Is diversity by definition is the state of being different, which is awesome. It's an incredible and amazing gift for all of us, that gift of diversity, because it's through diversity that we're able to be as innovative and creative as we can be with coming up with new thoughts, ideas, solutions, products, and services.
Right.
But if you think about that definition of diversity, Kurt, it's a state of being. It doesn't do anything on its own. And that's where the inclusion comes in, right? That's the action that we have to take, that we need to take in order to benefit from that gift of diversity. And diversity makes us all better when we embrace the identity diversity, the experiential diversity, the cognitive diversity. It makes us all better. And it's a matter of our willingness to embrace that diversity through the act of equity and inclusion.
Yeah, well, it's been proven over and over again that the more diversity you have, the more innovation that you have. The faster the company can grow and expand. I mean, there's nothing but benefits to it. So in your role in that bridge building, I mean, I know you have, which I think is really beneficial to your role. You have kind of a background in marketing and some of these other things, because it isn't just about you sitting at a table with a bunch of other people and saying, yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that's not okay. Right. There's a lot more to it in terms of the day-to-day. So, because you mentioned all these different groups inside of the organization and having to build those bridges between them, because I can't imagine your first week you were just walking around saying, cool, let me know if you have any diversity questions. I'll be in my office.
No, not at all. It's a matter of helping people understand the importance of each of those words we just talked about, helping them understand. One, let's define what diversity means. Let's define what equity means. Let's define what inclusion means. And let's take a look at how and why they should always coexist, and what happens when we treat them independent of each other. Right. And so that we can understand the benefits as well as the consequences, and making sure that people understand that diversity is not just about race or gender or sexual orientation. And I think a lot of times when people hear that, they immediately relegate their thoughts to, okay, well, here we go. This is just going to be about race, or it's just going to be about gender. It's just going to be about sexual orientation. And someone's going to come in and tell me why I'm sexist, why I'm homophobic, why I'm racist. And it is absolutely not about any of that at all. I just named the three primary forms of diversity. Identity diversity is absolutely one. We can't ignore it. What we see when we look at each other, we see what we perceive to be their race or their gender or their age. But the experiential diversity, there's so much value to that, just different lived experiences that you and I have had that contributes and informs our cognitive diversity, which is where a lot of the real richness and value comes. But that's because of the identity diversity and the experiential diversity that informs that cognitive diversity. And across those different departments, across those different disciplines, helping people understand the power of inclusion across all forms of diversity, and how that enhances employee engagement. It increases levels of performance. It elevates productivity, and ultimately, all of that contributes to greater profitability for any organization.
Right. Which is why we're in business in the first place, right?
well, that's one piece. I don't want to
We're trying to make some money, though.
we should all have a purpose beyond profit. But yes,
that's right.
If you're going into business, you're in business to make money. Absolutely. But I think the most successful businesses are those that have a purpose beyond profit.
Absolutely. Do you feel that with your role, because it is something that has to deal with all the way from the mission, vision, and values of the organization, all the way down to the hiring practices, and what job descriptions look like, or how they read, and different things like that. It's a pretty broad thing. Walk me through kind of a typical week for you. Are you interacting with these leaders across the organization pretty regularly? Like how do you operate, and what have you found successful so far in kind of your approach to the work that you're doing?
No, I think, and that's a great question. So to answer your question, yes, I engage with our leaders on a regular basis. So the executive leadership team, our C-suite executives, we meet weekly, right? We all meet weekly. And then I have regular meetings as well with our senior leadership team, those that run all of those different departments that we spoke about. And one of the things that we do as an organization that I'm extremely proud of is we offer or provide what we call our series of courageous conversations. And that is to encourage and empower people, quite honestly, to hear diverse perspectives of people that are different than them, whatever that difference may be. Because what can happen is we can craft narratives about people that are different than us that is not, quite honestly, not credible information, right? Based on our own life experiences, based on our own unconscious biases, based on how we've been conditioned to see people, based on what we've learned, what media we've consumed. And if we allow ourselves to craft those narratives about people that are different than us, and we shy away from the uncomfortable conversation, we're left to allow ourselves to behave and operate based on the narrative that we've created without ever taking the time to actually engage someone in some conversation, simply because that conversation may make us a little uncomfortable. But that's what it requires. So we have these facilitated dialogues of courageous conversations to equip people with the tools, the insights, and perspectives of people that think differently than them, so that we can create this level of familiarity with people that think differently than us, as a way to break down whatever biases and barriers may already exist. Absolutely. And that has proven to be an extremely valuable kind of approach for us, a tool for us.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially, I mean, again, I hate to be stereotypical here, but it is Minnesota, and people are a little conflict adverse here, just in their nature. And I can see that, facilitating those conversations can sometimes be a little bit challenging, because people are like, no, I just want to be nice to people. I don't want to challenge people. How have you found being able to pull people out in those conversations to be like, no, come on, like, share with us, because you've got to create a safe space for that, right?
And that's it. It's really creating a safe space, as you shared, and helping people to understand that, yes, the temporary sting of discomfort that you may feel initially, that pales in comparison, Kurt. It pales in comparison to the consequences of not having those conversations, because of the divisiveness that it could bring, the hindrance to engagement and performance and productivity that it can bring. So yeah, you may have that temporary sting of discomfort and inconvenience about engaging in this uncomfortable conversation. But I think it was Seneca the Younger that teaches us. And I get my philosophers confused. I don't know if Seneca was a Greek or Roman philosopher, but he was a philosopher. That much I know, right? Yes, he taught us that we suffer more in our imagination than we do in reality.
Yes,
it is never as bad as you think it's going to be. And I can just tell you from experience, anyone that's listening, I can just tell you from firsthand experience and testimonials. People are so glad that they've engaged in these discussions because they learn so much.
Right.
And it makes them a better colleague, a better coworker, a better ally, a better supporter. Now that they've been equipped with information about their peers and their colleagues to be able to better coexist and co-create more robust ideas and solutions.
Yeah, and I think that's extremely valuable because I've experienced it, not in necessarily the in sort of bringing different groups of teams together, because that in itself is challenging, right? So if you're trying to bring the marketing team and the IT team together, they've got different goals. People have talked forever about this idea of, or talked for a number of years, the buzzword is digital transformation, where there's nothing digital about that transformation. It's all cultural transformation. It's all being able to understand what the impact of your role has across the organization, not just in your little bubble. So I can see the work that you're doing not only is bridging that gap between, people in more underserved, underserved communities, but just in their feeling empowered in their role, is really powerful, because then they're bringing that innovation to the table because they feel that they're in a safe space. They feel that people trust them. They feel that they've got a voice. Like you're saying, it just makes the whole organization better if you can facilitate that. But it's not easy because, people are like, well, I've worked here for 20 years, so I'm good. I haven't gotten any trouble. Why are you talking to me? I haven't done anything wrong. That's where, because back to your point about the insecurity that creeps up very quickly with this sort of discussion.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest misconceptions, is that it's being done as because people are being penalized, that you did something wrong. No, this is preventative. This is to make sure that we are the best allies and supporters we can be, that we are exercising our empathy muscles, developing, strengthening, and exercising our empathy muscles as much as we can to avoid any sort of incident. This isn't because someone did anything wrong. Right. This is to make sure we're being proactive to prevent any of these mishaps from taking place. Because the reality is, more often than not, when people are on the receiving end of some sort of offense from someone else, whether it's a different department, whether it's because of a different race, a different gender, you pick the form of diversity, right? It's more often than not, it's rooted out of ignorance, not malice. Right. And the solution to ignorance should always be education. And I think it's our natural inclination to condemn someone that has given us some form of offense. We want that person to be penalized. You hurt me, you offended me, so I now want you to be hurt or penalized or feel all consequences. But we should understand that when we condemn ignorance, it actually creates more division. The solution to ignorance should be education. And so as we are proactive in educating ourselves about the differences, now we are much better equipped to extend grace, right, when it's needed and necessary. And that helps us to, again, strengthen our own empathy to be better service providers to each other. And understanding that, okay, I educate ignorance, I correct mistakes, right? And we need to extend a small measure of grace to be willing to correct people's mistakes, knowing that they will make mistakes. But yes, we should condemn misconduct. But there's a progression there, right? Yeah. Let's not go straight to condemnation because someone just didn't know.
Makes sense. Do you find if you were to give some advice to an organization that was maybe considering a role like yours or similar to bring into their organization, what are some of the things that you would tell them up front, some from lessons you've learned in your role, if people are looking to specifically put someone like yourself in a senior role in the organization? What's your advice to organizations that are interested in that?
The first thing I would say is have clarity of purpose. Understand why you are doing it. Now, I know and understand the significance of it, But if you're doing it just because someone told you should do it,
You
if
gotta
you're
check a
doing
box.
it to be performative, to check a box, it is not going to work. Have clarity of purpose and understanding why a chief diversity, equity, and inclusion officer matters to your organization. And it absolutely does. We talked about the data points about how the organizations that have these roles and that prioritize diversity and inclusion, that the organizations that are in the top quartile of diversity at executive leadership roles outperform their competitors by a significant margin. And I believe it's something like 28%.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so there are some business reasons as to why you should do it, but make sure you understand why you're doing it. You know, when we lack clarity of purpose, division, dysfunction, and discord is inevitable if you don't know why, and make sure everyone else understands why. Like, so I would emphasize the purpose, and then the right person, right? A person that genuinely has an agenda of contributing to the greater good. And, you know, we talk about agendas in a negative sense, but that should be, you should have an agenda, and that agenda should be to contribute to the greater good of everyone in the organization, right? And it can't be a left agenda, a right agenda, a black agenda, a white agenda. No, like it has to be someone that truly is there to elevate the lives of everyone involved.
Do you feel that it's important, you know, because I know you and I had talked before about it's got to come from the top. It can't just be sort of like I talked about, you know, 30 years ago, you watch a video and now, you know, you understand diversity. It can't be, you know, while I think some organizations, and I've talked to other people that are like, well, you know, the team will tell me when this is important and all these, it's like, I can't come from the bottom to the top. It's got to be something where the organization says, that's the hill I want to take. I want to be over there. And they've got to put a general like yourself in charge of making it happen. It can't just be, you know, well, I'll let the team sort it out. They'll let me know what they want to do. Have you found that to be a powerful part of your role, being in those executive discussions?
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up, because that's an important point to call out, is if this role, this function isn't supported from the top, it's not going to work. I mean, just quite candidly. And I am so fortunate to have the support of the entire executive leadership team, right? And that includes our CEO, that includes our ownership, right? You know, from Glenn Taylor to Mark Laurie to Alex Rodriguez to Ethan Casson, our CEO. Without that support, it doesn't work, because what happens is that level of support and kind of directive, then as it starts at the top, it cascades throughout the rest of the organization. People now understand that it is a priority. And then when it becomes a priority, you integrate it into the business imperatives of the organization. Right. It then becomes integrated into the measurements of success for the different departments and the different individuals that lead those departments. Because if I'm running the marketing department, or if I'm running the IT department, or pick a department, right? If I'm leading that department, and I even have a heart for diversity, equity, and inclusion, I have a desire to want to embrace diversity because I know it's the right thing to do just on a human level. But if there are no business imperatives and success measures attached to it, then I could want to do it all day long. But if you are telling me this is how you're going to measure me from doing a good job, then anybody is naturally going to default to doing the things that are the key performance indicators of whether or not they're doing a good job. And so I could want to embrace the DEI stuff with all my heart.
Right.
But if this is what's going to get me a promotion, this is what's going to get me a raise, this is what's going to get me recognized and rewarded, then my natural inclination is going to default to prioritizing those things.
Right. Yeah. And again, if people that are listening to this, maybe you're a small business, you're not as big as the an organization like the Timberwolves and the Lynx. For us, we brought in outside consultants that did some audits of our job descriptions, our policies, helped us really understand how the language we were using in a way could not be inclusive, and helped us change some of those things in a positive way. So if you're watching this and you can't necessarily have Tru show up at your door, having people that there are tons of consultants and agencies out there that can help people with this, and come in and understand how you're showing up in the world is a great place to first start to learn how to grow. Would you say, Tru, that again, I think you called it out earlier. I think one of the hardest things is it's got to start with that individual understanding and wanting to educate, whereas they're like, well, I'm part of this organization. Is the organization just going to tell me what good looks like, and then I go and do that thing, right? So do you find that over the course of your time there, what are some of the things that you're really proud of? What are some of the things that you feel has moved the needle?
Yeah, I think I love that you pointed out that the individual, the accountability of the individual.
Yeah.
Right. As an organization, we're going to equip you and provide you with the tools that are necessary to help you to become successful. But there has to be some individual accountability
Yes.
in the process. I often say that a better world starts with a better me. So I have to make sure I am doing my part to ensure that the entire body is moving in the direction that it needs to move, and the entire body is healthy. And so one of the things that I'm most proud of is how people have responded to these series of courageous conversations, how people are saying, okay, now that I've gotten a better understanding of this, I want to know, how can I be better? What can I do to contribute to a more inclusive and equitable environment? How can I leverage my experience and my gifts and my passions? And that we're getting people that are raising their hand and reaching out and saying, because we've now educated them, and that's empowering, right?
Yeah.
Once you've been educated and informed, and it's not done in a judgmental or an accusatory way. And I think that's the key, Kurt. This is not about an indictment on anyone. It's about empowering people with information and educating them to be able to leverage their gifts and their passions to serve in a way that gives them a sense of value, right? And how they are contributing. But it also goes back to clarity of purpose. Once they understand the purpose, the overarching organizational purpose and why we exist, right? That purpose beyond profit that we talked about.
Right.
Now they can say, okay, this is what I know we value. Where do I contribute? How do I fit into that? And helping them understand how their unique purpose can contribute to the greater purpose, that's empowering, that's fulfilling. That makes you feel good, right? And so the things that I'm most proud of is we have a group of people that are saying, hey, how can I add value to this effort, because I want to be a part of the solution.
Right. They're not waiting for you to show up and knock on their door. But again, we talked about this. You create a safe space, you do the education, you create that space for them to come in and fill it with those new ideas and those new approaches. I think that's extremely powerful. It's like unlocking a superhero, in some of these folks. Because I've seen some of the changes that can happen in organizations with a role like yours. And that's why I think it's just so powerful that, having someone like yourself at the head of it, but also, again, understanding that your job is not to go in and just tell people what to do. It's to help guide them to where they actually want to be. They might just not know it yet.
Right? Well, no, that's spot on, right? I can't tell everyone what to do. I mean, here's the thing, like, definition of leaders, like, and I often make the distinction between leadership and management, right? And leadership is really about empowering people, right? Where management is really relegated to the things that you can control, right? And so if you're familiar with the principle of the triple constraints of management,
Yep.
what that teaches us, right, is this, is that these are the things that you can control in management. You can control time, you can control money, and you can control quality. Now, the third is a function of the first two, right? How much
Yes.
time do I want to invest? How much money do I want to invest? And that will determine the quality of the outcome of the product, right? What we can't control are people. As much as we try to, you can't control people, right? But you can lead people. And that's through empowering them with the right information to help unlock their gifts, unlock their treasures, unlock their talents, and help them understand how they can contribute to the greater good of the organization. And so that's the approach that I take. I can't tell you what to do, but I could spend time with you understanding, okay, what gets you up in the morning, not what keeps you up at night, what gets you up in the morning, what gets you going, right? And then what are your gifts? What are the things that you are just really good at? What are the things that you're passionate about, the true desires of your heart? And so let's find the intersection point between your gifts and your passions, and this is where you can serve that provides the most value. Man, that just gets people ready to just run through walls.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Because they are recognizing their own value and contributing in a way that is truly aligned with their gifts and their passions.
It's amazing. And again, I can see that I can tell in your voice, Tru. I mean, it can be such a powerful feeling for you when you're watching those people grow and that transition happen. It's got to be super fulfilling for you.
It is. It's extremely fulfilling. And I think that's the right word, right? It brings me joy. This is truly fulfilling, and I want that for everyone. And I get the opportunity to see that replicated in others. Now, I will say, doing the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion can be taxing. It can be exhausting.
A lot of emotional labor.
A lot of emotional labor. It can be traumatizing at times. Yeah, all of those things are true, but the fulfillment and gratification that comes with it, the transformation that you get to see in doing this work, it's immeasurable. I can't quantify the feeling that comes from that. And so it's worth every ounce of emotional investment when you see those transformations take place. And recognizing, and you talked before about how DE&I used to be approached about just watching a video, someone coming in and sharing information with you. We've learned, through the evolution of this work and just better understanding of human behavior and psychology, is that transformational behavior is much more emotional than it is intellectual.
Yep.
We can't just give you information and think that is going to be enough for you to have a behavioral change. It's really putting you in positions to solve problems alongside people, putting you in positions to do life alongside people. And now you have that emotional connection and you connect with them on a human level and realize the value that that other person brings. And that is where the real transformation takes place. And I think we try and just solely educate the mind, but we never help people understand how to connect what's in their head with what's in their heart.
Yeah. Well, when I talked to Thad Levine at the Twins, he had talked about the next generation is demanding this sort of approach to how they show up at work. It's not a sort of, be happy you got a job. And they're like, no, thanks. I don't want to work here. So you're saying, your organization is growing. It's hiring younger folks, and they're asking for you to have this sort of focus as an organization on diversity, equity, inclusion. And so, is that also a focus for you? Is like the people you're not just, the people who are working there day to day, but how is what you're doing shaping the people that are going to show up in the future?
Well, it's about understanding the the generational diversity piece of
Uh,
it, right? As we talk about diversity, it's about understanding that with each new era or new generation,
yeah.
there are going to be new expressions.
Yep.
There are
Yep.
going to be new expectations, right? New experiences. That is how we get those kind of generational archetypes that we have. And a lot of times they are rooted in stereotypes, but there are some generational truths about each generation, because the things that shape a generation, right? What are the things that shape a generation? It's parenting styles, it's geography, and it's major societal events. And so we have to understand that when each generation has come of age, they have a certain generational archetype that was formed by those three things. But what we lose sight of is each generation tends to project its own expectations onto the next generation.
Yes.
But the times have changed and they've evolved, and
Yep.
we have to build those bridges across the generations. I mean, and I love that you talked about with the current generation, right? There is a greater expectation of purpose, of giving them a sense of purpose of why they show up. And so, if we go back a couple of generations, right? And again, universally speaking, right? The baby boomer generation, what the driver typically was what you did, right?
Yeah.
You were a doctor, you were a lawyer,
Yep.
you were a
Yep.
nurse, you were an
Yep.
engineer. Like the
Yeah. You
driver
go
was
for a trophy.
what
You're
right, you did. And then if you kind of get to Gen X, right, after baby boomers, my generation, the driver, was largely influenced by where you did, right? Where it
yeah.
was what you did, oh, I worked at Nike, I worked at IBM, I worked at Apple. Like, it was kind of where you did.
Yeah.
And now as we get to millennials and Gen Z, it's more about why I do what I'm doing. I'm not as driven by the what. Yeah, that has some impact. I'm not as driven by the where. Yeah, that has some impact. But the point of entry is why. What is the purpose? What are your social responsibility position? What are are you a civic minded organization, right? Why am I here, and why do you exist? And so it's making sure that the baby boomers in the organization and the Gen X in the organization have an understanding of that, right? It's not
Yeah.
right or wrong. It's just different, right? And making sure we are managing that expectation gap.
I love that you called that out, because it's funny. I had this discussion with someone not long ago who was like, it's like, oh, I got Facebook wants to interview me, and I'm like, oh man, that would be so great for your resume. And they're like, I would never work for that organization. and here in my mind, because I'm Gen X, I'm thinking just like you said, like I'm like, oh, but that would be such a gold star. It would help you write, kind of your future and your career. But yeah, exactly to your point, that's where we kind of went whoop, like, but yeah, to your point, and I talk to a lot of, business leaders that look like me, and it's exactly what you had described. They weren't brought up to talk about your emotions at work and to bring those things to work. So many times when I'm coaching another business owner, most of the time it's like, why are these people so many feelings? They have so many feelings, and they're not equipped to deal with it. And to your point, I think it's because they haven't taken the time to look at themselves and what's important to them, where their values are, where they draw the line. Because I think, again, to your point, it's a generational thing where it's like, well, what? You have a job and it's a good job. You get paid good money. So what are you complaining about?
It's so funny, man.
Right. And every time I talk to these folks, I'm telling you, and I'm not trying to be blanket here, but it's a lot of older white guys that are just like, I was never taught to deal with, my employees' feelings. They didn't talk about that in my MBA program, Tru. We didn't have that class. I missed that. I skipped that day.
and then it does, and it creates conflict, right? And those
Yeah.
are the types of bridges that I'm called to build each day, right? But understanding, right? It goes back to that education, Kurt, making sure I understand how the different audience members feel about a topic, but not just how they feel about it, why. Going back to purpose, right? Why they feel that way. Now, once I've been equipped with understanding how you feel and why you feel that way, now I'm in a much better position to be that bridge builder to help connect, because I have that empathy, right? And there are 3 levels of empathy. There's cognitive empathy that says, okay, even though that's not my experience, I may not think that way. I understand why you think that way, right? Then there's emotional empathy that says, okay, that's not been my experience, right? And I don't feel that way, but now at least I understand why you feel that way. And then the compassionate empathy, right, which is a combination of the first 2, is what compels us to now be willing to take some sort of action or adjust and make some sort of behavioral change to help address the pain or the sting of exclusion that you may feel. Now we can come together and co-create some solutions to address that. And the interesting thing about the feelings, right? I'm Gen X too, and I remember some of my bosses coming up saying in a meeting, right? It's like, well, I just don't feel like that would be the right thing to do, or would make sense, something along those lines. After the meeting was over, it was a client meeting. And I remember my boss said to me, it doesn't matter how you feel, right? This is about the facts and the data and all of this. And now that I've had a chance to grow and evolve and self-educate, man, that was some horrible direction, because it does matter how we feel. What I want everyone to understand, right, is the part of our brain that processes information and data is a storage unit. It's a reservoir of information, but that's its only function. Its only function is to store the information, right? The part of the brain that compels us to do something, to take an action, to behave a certain way, is the part of the brain that controls emotion. So if we want people to perform, if we want people to engage, if we want people to elevate, to take action, to do anything that's behavioral, it 100% does matter how our words, actions, choices, and decisions make them feel. I think historically we have celebrated and rewarded physical energy, what you can do, what you can physically do, right? That physical energy gets rewarded and acknowledged and celebrated in the workplace, right? You get trophies and awards at these company functions. He made 8,200 widgets, right? In an hour, right? We celebrate mental energy, right? We reward that, right? With your ability to be strategic and come up with ideas. This plan that Kurt came up with was amazing, it helped to save, drop 30%, of costs, or whatever the case is. What we rarely recognize, celebrate, and acknowledge is emotional energy. And it is our emotional energy that really is the source of strength and continuity for teams. Is because how we're able to connect with one another on an emotional level, on a human level. But we rarely acknowledge, reward, or celebrate the emotional energy that is required to be exerted every day, right? That is the source of the strength of the teams that we build. But we fail to acknowledge, recognize, and celebrate that.
I think that's a powerful statement. Again, the idea that you're talking about is that, the emotional labor that needs to go in versus the physical labor, it can be twice the amount of weight in a person's life that they have to deal with.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate the work you're doing, Tru. I could talk to you all day, but I know you got to get to doing stuff. So if I want to connect with you, Tru, if I want to follow you and find out more info, I know you do a lot of speaking events. and a number of things. Where's a great place to follow you and find out more about the work, the impact you're having?
Yep. On LinkedIn, it is Tru Pettigrew. My name, Tru Pettigrew, Pettigrew. On Instagram, it is Tru Access, Truaccess. On Twitter, it is Tru Access. And on what's that other one? Facebook. Yes, can't forget Facebook, where your young millennial friend refuses to work. It is Tru Pettigrew, again, simply my name.
That's great. Well, Tru, I appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you so much for taking the time. I learned so much from our conversation today, and I hope to have you back on. And I'm excited for the work you're doing. I can't thank you enough.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, great. Well, folks, it is time to close down the show, but thank you for taking the time to join me and Tru today. He's great, isn't he? Fantastic. It's just amazing. I love it. So we got more live shows coming up. So make sure that you take time to, follow and subscribe, and what do the kids say? Smash the like button. Again, I'm Gen X. I don't know these things. So I appreciate you taking the time. Have a great week. Okay. And take care of yourself.